What is up, guys? MCMMA here, and in today's video I am going to be giving my breakdown and predictions for UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan versus Hooker. This is a stacked fight night. The entire card stacked from the prelims to the main card to the main event. I'm really excited for this one, and let's get right into these predictions. All right, first fight of the night we have got Marek Bujlo taking on Denzel Freeman. Both of these guys are making their UFC debuts in this one, and I don't know too much about either one of them. Neither one of them fought on like the Contender Series or anything. I'm gonna go with Buljo by decision, just because more people are picking him on Tapology, but I know like nothing about this matchup. So let's get on to the next. All right, next up we have got a pretty interesting matchup at welterweight between Nicholas Dalby and Saigid Izagakmaev. I think that's how you say it. Nicholas Dalby has been mainstay in the welterweight division for a long time. He's always been a pretty tough test for a lot of up-and-comers. He's a super durable fighter. He tends to kind of pick up the pace as the fight goes on, as we saw when he beat Gabriel Bonfim a couple years back. And Saigid, he is part of Team Khabib. He's part of Khabib's camp. He is coming over from ONE FC, and he hasn't fought in almost 3 years at this point. I don't think it wasn't because of injury or anything. I think, from what I've heard, he was looking for a fight for like almost 2 years. And I mean, as some of you may know, ONE FC is kind of a shit show right now, so they just weren't able to like get anything together, or they didn't want to give him a fight. But this is going to be his first fight in almost 3 years. So he is a pretty big favorite in this one, as some of you may expect, given his ties to Dagestan and Khabib specifically. But I think this is going to be a tough matchup for him. I mean, getting a guy like Nicholas Dalby in your debut is not an easy fight at all. But that being said, I am going to pick Saigid by decision. I honestly think part of the reason why I'm doing that is because if this fight is close at all, we know they're going to give Saigid the win because it's going to be in the Middle East. He's a guy who they're probably looking to build up a little bit. And because of that, I think it's going to be a close fight, and I think that if it goes to if Dalby doesn't get a finish, realistically he's probably going to lose this one, which sucks. But I think that's just how it's going to go. So I am going to pick Izagakmaev by decision here. All right, next up we have got Nurulo Alviev taking on the debuting Shem Rock. Aliev is 2-0 in the UFC so far, undefeated in his career. He's beat Joe Selecki, I think, and one other guy. Pretty low level wins, but Shamrock is a guy who is coming over from Europe. He's a guy who likes to talk a lot. He's a pretty big personality, but fight wise, he hasn't been particularly impressive so far on the regional scene. And because of that, I am going to go with Aliev by decision here. I think he's just better, realistically. And like I've been saying, especially in the Middle East, we know who they're going to lean towards. So I'm going to pick Aliev here. All right, next up we have got Ismail Nardiev taking on Ryan Loder. Nardiev coming off of his super strange fight against Jung Young Park earlier this year, in which he got deducted 2 points in one of the rounds. I think it was for like an illegal knee to the head, but he lost that fight pretty convincingly, and he has not been super impressive in his UFC career so far. I remember he had a pretty close fight with Bruno Silva a little while back, and that was a pretty washed version of Bruno Silva. And as for Ryan Loder, he has had one official UFC fight. He fought Azamat Bakoyev and got absolutely starched. And before that, he beat Robert Valentin in the Ultimate Fighter finale. But both of these guys are not guys that I'm super high on. I don't really think they have too bright of a future in the UFC. But I am going to go with Nardiev in this one because of Ryan Loder's just abysmal striking. Like, his striking is genuinely horrid if you have ever seen him fight. If you saw his fight against Robert Valentin, it was a miracle that he won that, honestly, because he was able to take Valentin down and beat him with ground and pound. But on the feet, Ryan Loder is absolutely clueless, and I think Nardiev is probably going to be able to piece him up pretty easily. All right, next up, we have got a fight that I'm very excited for. A super, super interesting matchup between two of the best prospects in the bantamweight division. We have got Beksat Almakhan taking on Alexandre Topuria. Beksat, as we know, is 1-1 in the UFC, but his loss, like, it barely even counts. He lost on very short notice to Umar Nurmagomedov in his UFC debut, which is also, side note, but Umar got a fight against number 2 ranked Corey Sandhagen off of that win against an unranked UFC debutant in Beksat Almakhan. Just let that soak in for a sec. But Beksat came back in a second UFC fight against Brad Katona earlier this year and knocked him out in, I think it was like 30 seconds or something. Super quick knockout. Beksat's a super high-level striker. One of my favorite fighters in the division, honestly. He's super fun to watch. Alexandre Topuria, as many of you know, is Ilya's older brother. He has also had one fight in the UFC where he beat Colby Thickness by decision earlier this year. I mean, these guys are both like pretty high-level fighters, even though they're pretty early on into their UFC careers. But I am going to be going with Beksat in this one. I think that his striking is just going to get the job done here. Like, he is a very high-level striker, I'm telling you guys. So I am going to pick Beksat by KO in this one because he's got a lot of pop, too. All right, next up, we have got number 12 ranked flyweight Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Kyoji Horiguchi. This is a super interesting matchup. Kind of odd matchmaking, you could say. Tagir, as many of you know, is also part of Team Khabib. He's been in the UFC for a little while now. He has had a lot of success just in terms of winning fights, but he's a guy who I've never been particularly impressed with. He's been fighting a ton of unranked guys, even though he's been in the rankings for a little while for whatever reason, but he's never really been able to make like huge statements in his UFC wins. And then Kyoji Horiguchi is returning to the UFC after a long stint in other promotions. I know he was in Rizin for a little bit. He was in Bellator too. He fought a lot of pretty big names in Bellator, at least like relative to the names you can fight there. Like, he actually fought Sergio Pettis, but that one was in Rizin. He fought Patchy Mix. He fought Pettis in Bellator too. He fought Kaya Sakura back in the day. He's been fighting pretty solid competition, even though he hasn't been in the UFC for a very long time. Yeah, he fought Manel Kape back in the day. And I just think Horiguchi's better than Tagir Ulanbekov. And I think even with the baked-in advantage that Ulanbekov has, being a Muslim, fighting in an Arabic country, I still think Horiguchi's better than him. So give me Horiguchi by decision in this one. I'm really excited to see how he does in his second UFC stint, because in his first UFC stint, he was honestly great. I mean, he was 7-1. He only lost to Mighty Mouse when they fought for the belt. So he's a guy who's probably should have been in the UFC for a while now, because I think he was a guy who, especially earlier in his career, because he's kind of out of his prime now. He's like 35. Like if he was in the UFC like 5 years ago, like probably around when like Mighty Mouse left, he probably could have been a title contender, like a real title contender. And I'm excited to see how he does in his second stint in the UFC. We'll see how good he really still is in this one, and I think he's still got it. So I'm going to go with Horiguchi by decision here. All right, next up we have got Abdul Rahman Yakyaev taking on Rafael Cerqueira. There's not too much to break down in this one. I really don't know a lot about Yakyaev, but Rafael Cerqueira is maybe the worst UFC fighter I've ever seen in my life, so I am going to pick Yakyaev by knockout. Cerqueira is 0-3 in the UFC. It's honestly a miracle that he still has a spot on the roster, since he has lost to some very low-level opponents. But for some reason, he's still around, and I'm going to go with Yakyaev by KO here. Cerqueira sucks. That's really all there is to it. All right, last fight on the prelims, we have got Bogdan Grad taking on the debuting Luke Riley. Bogdan Grad, he's a pretty solid unranked featherweight. He's coming off of a loss to Muhammad Naimov, but he was decently competitive in that fight. He's been pretty solid in his UFC career so far. I think he's a pretty good fighter. And Luke Riley is a guy who is very popular in the UK. He's coming over from Cage Warriors. and he's a guy who a lot of people are pretty high on. And I think that even though this is somewhat of a tough debut fight for him with an opponent like Bogdan Grad, I still think that Luke Riley has got what it takes to get this one done. So I am going to pick Luke Riley by decision here. All right, kicking off the main card, we have got a flyweight bout between number 8 ranked Alex Perez and number 9 ranked Asu Almabayev. Alex Perez returning after a very long layoff, as some of you may know, in his most recent fight, like mid last year, he fought Tatsuro Taira, and Tatsuro Taira basically blew his knee out. Actually, not basically, he literally did. He put him in like a body triangle or something, and like leaned back, and he just obliterated Alex Perez's knee. It was a pretty nasty move, but I mean, as we know, Taira's a phenomenal grappler, but Perez hasn't fought since then, and Asu is coming off of a win against Jose Ochoa at, I believe it was the Saudi fight night, like over the summer, but that was not an impressive performance, just to be completely honest, and I really am not too high on Asu in general. He's not a very good striker. Like, he shoots a ton of takedowns, he lands a good amount of them, but he's not like a particularly competitive submission threat at the UFC level, and he's a really, really boring fighter. Like, if you guys watched his last fight against Jose Ochoa, I mean, he took Ochoa down like 9 times, and there was still the argument that Ochoa could have won the fight. Like, that's how little Asu Almabayev was doing with his takedowns, and this is kind of a tough one for me because if he was facing pretty much any other opponent in the top 10, I would probably pick against Almabayev, but because he's facing a guy in Alex Perez who hasn't fought in a year and a half, and even before that was a guy who's always been kind of sitting on his rankings. He's a guy who like has always been in the top 10, but like nobody really knows why. I mean, his only win in the past like fucking 4 years is like I think it's Mateus Nicolau, who got cut after losing to Almabayev. So I am going to go with Almabayev by decision here, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Alex Perez won the fight, since Perez actually looked pretty good, because this was, I mean, in 2024, was coming off of like 2+ years of inactivity, and he fought 3 times in 2024. He fought against Muhammad Makayev, which was a very close fight that I honestly thought Perez won. Then he beat Nicolau, and then he fought Tatsuro Taira, where he blew his knee out, but he looked pretty solid in those fights. So I am going to pick Almabayev here because I think Perez is just, I mean, with the ring rust, and I think Almabayev's probably just going to smudge him on the ground, but I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Perez won this fight because I do not think very highly of Asu Almabayev. All right, next up, we have got the GOAT returning, the Blob himself. Number 11 ranked Shamil Gaziev is taking on number 7 Sergey Spivak. Gaziev is coming off of a knockout win over, I think it was Thomas Peterson earlier this year, and Spivak is coming off of his close loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta. This is a pretty decent step up for Shamil Gaziev. This is the first top 10 opponent that he's faced in a little bit since his Jairzinho Rosenstrike fight. But I mean, I got to go with my guy here. I'm going to go with Gaziev by knockout here. I think he's a much better striker than Sergey Spivak, and I think he has the capabilities to defend the takedowns that will, I mean, inevitably Sergey Spivak's going to shoot on him. And I think Gaziev is going to be able to handle those, and especially in a 3-round fight, I favor him strike. I mean, we know his gas tank's horrible, but I think he has the capabilities to get a finish here, and I think he's going to knock Sergey Spivak out and continue the title walk. All right, next up, we have got maybe the weirdest matchup of the entire year. We have got former middleweight Jack Hermansson taking on former lightweight Maitek Orolbai. I mean, I understand why Maitek's moving up to welterweight, since I don't think he's ever made 155 pounds in the UFC. He always would end up missing weight, and he'd end up fighting at a catch weight. But I don't get this move at all for Jack Hermansson, to be totally honest. He's a guy who's fought at middleweight his entire career, and it's not like he ever looked like he was a particularly undersized middleweight either. So I don't even know if he's going to be able to make weight in this fight, and I think even if he does, he's going to be pretty drained. So especially like this late in his career, I really don't understand this move. And I'm going to go with Oralby here. I think that Oralby just has the skill advantage basically everywhere. And I think 170 is probably Oralby's true weight class. And I think Hermansson's going to be drained. I think, especially after he's coming back pretty soon after a pretty devastating knockout against RoboCop Rodriguez, and he's moving down a weight class. Like, I just don't understand why he's fighting at welterweight, to be totally honest. And I think Oralby is going to look much better physically, and I think that he's going to have the skill advantage here. So I am going to pick Oralby by decision here, but this is a super, super strange fight. I thought it was like a troll when they first announced this one. All right, next up we have got number 9 ranked light heavyweight Volkan Oezdemir taking on number 14 ranked Alonzo Menifield. Oezdemir hasn't fought in almost a year at this point. He most recently lost to Carlos Ulberg, and Menifield is coming off a couple wins against low-level UFC competition. I think it was Julius Walker and Umar Sy are the 2 wins that he's coming off of. But, I mean, there's not too much to break down here. Volkan Oezdemir should win this fight easily. I think Alonzo Menifield is one of the worst-ranked fighters in the entire UFC. And outside of the heavyweight division, he might be the worst-ranked fighter in the whole UFC. And, I mean, Volkan Oezdemir is a guy who's been in the top 10 for a very long time. He's a mainstay. He's always kind of stuck around. And even when he's fighting higher-level opponents, he tends to be pretty competitive. Like, his fight against Carlos Ulberg was pretty competitive. And I would genuinely be shocked if he lost this fight. I don't know what the odds are, but Volkan Oezdemir should be like a minus 700 favorite in this one. So I'm going to go with Oezdemir by knockout here. Menifield has proven in the past that he doesn't have the best chin, like when he got knocked out by Azamat Murzakanov. And, I mean, Oezdemir is just so much better than him. Like, I would genuinely be shocked if Oezdemir lost this fight. So my pick is going to be Oezdemir by knockout. All right, in the co-main event, we have got a very interesting fight at welterweight. We have got the number 1 ranked contender and former champ Belal Muhammad taking on number 6 ranked Ian Gary. Belal, as we know, is coming off of his loss to JDM, in which he lost the belt. And that was his first loss in, I don't even know, it was in a very long time. But he was on a roll before then, beating Leon Edwards, Gilbert Burns, Wonder Boy. A lot of big names, a lot of top contenders at welterweight. And Ian Gary is coming off of his decision win over Carlos Prates, which looks better by the day. I mean, that win is aging incredibly. And Gary, as we know, has only one loss in the UFC, and that was on short notice to Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I'm going to go with Gary here. I think, especially in a 3-round fight, he's definitely going to have the advantage because, he's a super long, rangy striker. He's definitely going to be able to outpoint Belal Muhammad on the feet, and I think that he's going to have a lot of success defending Belal's wrestling. Like I said, especially in a 3-round fight, Belal's not going to be able to really overwhelm him in the later rounds with his pace, and I think Ian Gary is going to be able to outpoint him to a decision win. So my official pick is going to be Gary by decision, but on a side note, I don't think that Ian Gary is going to win in a dominant enough fashion to earn himself a title shot, since, both Michael Morales and Carlos Prates scored huge knockouts this weekend. So I think that Gary is probably going to need one more fight after this win, but I guarantee you, if he wins this fight, he is going to start begging for a title shot. So be prepared for that, but I do think Ian Gary is going to win this fight. All right, last but not least, we have got the main event. We've got number 2 ranked lightweight Arman Tsarukyan returning after his extensive layoff to take on number 7 ranked Dan Hooker. Arman, as we know, has not fought since UFC 300, which is insane to just say out loud. It's been like over a year and a half at this point, I think. As we know, he was scheduled to fight Islam Makhachev at the start of the year, but he pulled out on, like, I forget if it was like a day or 2, but he pulled out on extremely short notice. He said it was because he got hurt, but I think it's because he wasn't on weight and he was going to miss weight. But that's a topic for another day. Dan Hooker also has not fought in a very long time. He's coming off of his most recent win against Mateusz Gamrot at UFC 305. Hooker also was scheduled to fight earlier this year. He was scheduled to fight Justin Gaethje at UFC 313, but he broke his hand, and he was dealing with that and a couple of other injuries for a while now, so he's only now coming back. In terms of how I think this fight is going to play out, I think Arman is going to absolutely dominate Dan Hooker. This is probably the easiest matchup that you could give Arman in the top, like, 6, 7, whatever it is. I mean, Dan Hooker is, I mean, he's a tough motherfucker. We know he is. He always puts on amazing fights, but he doesn't have the, like, wrestling and grappling defense that you need to be competitive against a guy like Arman Tsarukyan. And I think that Arman is going to take him down at will, and I think that he's going to brutalize Dan Hooker on the ground with ground and pound. Arman is, even though he's an amazing wrestler, he's not much of a submission threat, but his ground and pound is absolutely vicious. If you guys have seen what he did to guys like Yoel Alvarez, I mean, that was absolutely brutal. And I think that he's going to do something similar to Dan Hooker. So I'm going to pick Arman by ground and pound TKO, probably in like the 3rd or 4th round, somewhere around there, because I don't see how Dan Hooker is going to be able to stop Arman from taking him down and beating him up on the ground. Because, I mean, even though Dan Hooker is a striker, like, he's not an amazing striker by any means. He's more just a guy who relies on his toughness and his grit, and he kind of just, like, out-toughs people for the most part. And I think Arman's going to try and come out here and prove a message. I think he's going to try and make a statement because he's been getting disrespected like crazy by both the fans and the UFC. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. He definitely does, but he's going to try and make a statement in this fight, and I think that he's going to be able to do so. So give me Arman here by TKO. Like I said, I think he's going to get it done with ground and pound, and I think he's going to absolutely dominate Dan Hooker in this fight. All right, there are my predictions for UFC Fight Night Tsarukyan versus Hooker. As always, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of my picks. Make sure to leave a like on the vid, subscribe to the channel, and thank you guys for watching.